That's good. Anyhow, as we honor the women in our lives this morning, I thought it would be a great time to also honor the women that helped found our country. And ABC TV correspondent Cookie Roberts authored a book by that very name, Founding Mothers. And in her book, she follows the lives of some of the most famous women of the Revolutionary era. Abigail Adams, Mary Bartlett, Benjamin Franklin, Martha Jefferson. All of these were wives of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. There are, of course, Martha Washington, Margaret Shippen Arnold, both were wives of military folks, and of course, Betsy Ross, the most famous seamstress of our time. But I venture to guess that most people in the room would not recognize the name Mary Ludwig Hays-McCauley. That's a mouthful. And yet Mary was one of the most famous heroines of the Revolution, and Mary and I have something in common. True story. Mary Ludwig was born in Trenton, New Jersey on October 13, 1744. Mary's family included her older brother, John, and their parents, Maria, and Johann George Ludwig, that were German immigrants. She never attended school. She never learned to read, as education was considered a waste of money on girls at that time. Her father died in 1769, and following June, her mother married a gentleman by the name of John Hayes. In early 1777, Molly married William Hayes, a cousin of her stepfather, in the town of Carlisle, Pennsylvania. In that same year, William Hayes enlisted in the 4th Pennsylvania Artillery of the Continental Army, and during the winter of 1777, Molly Hayes joined her husband at the Continental Army's winter camp at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. She was one of a group of women led by Martha Washington, known as camp followers, who would wash clothes and blankets and care for the sick and dying soldiers. As William was training as a military officer, Mary Hayes and the camp followers served as water carriers, carrying water to the troops who were drilling in the field. Also, artillerymen needed a constant supply of fresh water to cool down the hot cannon barrel and to soak the sponge at the end of the ramrod, the long pole which is used to clean the sparks and the gunpowder out of the barrel. It was during this time that Mary Hayes probably received her nickname, as troops would shout, "Molly, pitcher," wherever they needed fresh water. And that's where the story of Molly Pitcher begins. In the Battle of Monmouth, which was the British troops had left Philadelphia, and they had occupied it since October of 1977 and headed to New York, George Washington moved his army out of Valley Forge and pursued the British through New Jersey, catching them at Monmouth Courthouse. At that battle, on June 1778, Mary Hayes attended the Revolutionary soldiers by giving them water. Just before the battle started, she found a spring to serve as her water supply. 2 places on that battlefield currently are marked as the Molly Pitcher Spring. Mary Hayes spent much of her early day caring for the soldiers and the artillerymen, and often under heavy fire from the British troops. The weather was very hot that day. It was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Sometime during the battle, William Hayes collapsed, either wounded or suffering from heat exhaustion. As her husband was carried off the battlefield, Mary Hayes took his place at the cannon. For the rest of the day, in the heat of the battle, Mary continued to swab and load the cannon, using her husband's ramrod. At one point, a British musket ball, or cannonball, flew between her legs and tore off the bottom of her skirt. Mary supposedly said something to the effect of, "Well, that could have been worse if it had been going a little higher." In his memoir about the Revolutionary War, Private Joseph Plum Martin, a Revolutionary soldier, recalls this very incident in his writing at the Battle of Monmouth. And he wrote, "A woman whose husband belonged in the military and who was attached to the cannon at an engagement attended with her husband at the cannon the whole time, while in the act of reaching for a cartridge and having one of her feet far in front of the other, a cannonball from the enemy passed directly through her legs without doing any damage except carrying away the lower part of her petticoat." Later in the evening, the fighting was stopped due to darkness, and although George Washington and his commanders expected the battle to continue the following day, British forces retreated during the night and continued up towards Sandy Hook, New Jersey. After the battle, George Washington asked about the woman whom he had seen loading a cannon on the battlefield. In commemoration of her courage, he issued Mary Hays a warrant as a non-commissioned officer. Afterwards, she was known as Sergeant Molly, a nickname that she used the rest of her life. Excuse me. Following the end of the war, Mary Hays and her husband William, who did survive the battle, returned to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and during this time, Mary gave birth to a son, John. In 1778, William Hays died, and in 1793, Mary Hays married John McCauley. McCauley was a stonecutter for the local prison, Carlisle prison. However, the marriage was reported not a happy one, as McCauley had a violent temper. He had a violent temper. It was McCauley who was the cause of Mary's financial downfall, causing Mary to sell 200 acres of bounty land left to her by her husband, William Hays, for $30, sometimes between 1807 and 1810. McCauley disappeared, and it is not known what happened to him. Mary McCauley continued to live in Carlisle, and she earned her living as a general servant for hire, cleaning and painting houses, washing windows, and caring for children and sick people. Sergeant Molly, as she was known, was often seen in the streets of Carlisle, Pennsylvania, wearing a striped skirt, wool stockings, and a ruffled cap. She was well liked by the people of Carlisle, even though she often cursed like a sailor. On February 21st, 1822, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania awarded Mary McCauley an annual pension of $40 for her service. Mary died January 22nd, 1832, in Carlisle at the approximate age of 88. Through the time, many things have been talked about Molly Pitcher, and we have remembered her in many ways. There's roads named after her. There's a rest area on the turnpike in New Jersey that's named after her. And even the military Fort Bragg out in California, they have an annual Molly Pitcher Day where they show off artillery and guns on her behest. With all of that honor, you probably wonder what it is that Molly Pitcher and I have in common. Well, Molly and her husband fought at the Battle of Monmouth. And two of my ancestor patriots, Jacob Van Fossen and Leonard Van Fossen, also fought at the Battle of Monmouth. And now you know the rest of the story.